Hello everyone, and today we're having Joaquin Ricca, technical manager for AI and analytics at Telefonica IoT and Big Data. We are welcoming here Joaquin here today to talk about IoT, to explain what it actually is, where the buzzword is coming from, and how it is used in the industry today. And just so that you don't get tired of my voice, we'll get straight to Joaquin's explanation of his own background and the topic of today's talk. So please.
Okay. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me again. I think I didn't say it before, but in any case, thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm here just try to bring some light into this kind of mysterious terminology, IoT, big data, and so on and so forth. So I've prepared more or less kind of some quick slides, although I have 1 hour and a half to explain them in order to see what I want to convey. So if you just let me share, because I'm not really good at this. There you go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So the title, Riding the Third Wave. What does this mean? Okay, so you'll see at the end of this slides, what I prepared is a recommended reading, a book that I read last year that it was really enlightening, and it's written by Steve Case, who was maybe you don't know this guy, but he was one of the founding fathers of the internet in his own way. Okay, so the title of the book is actually The Third Wave. What he explains is, well, we see throughout the lecture, that we are actually in the new era or the third wave of the internet. Okay, so what we need to understand here is what it actually means, this new kind of, well, this actual change of this third wave, and how does IoT, 5G, AI, big data all come together. Okay, so before going any further, I would like to introduce myself briefly. So who's the bearded guy? I studied in telecom engineering at University Carlos III of Madrid, here in Spain. I did a master's degree in Telecom Paritech, experience focused on data science and data engineering, and I have a specialized or expertise title by the MIoT Institute of Madrid about management of IoT projects. Okay, so what I do for a living is I'm actually a technical guy. I started as a big data engineer, and I've moved along through different steps in my professional career. Right now, what I do is I'm a technical manager or course delivery team manager at Telefonica IoT and Big Data. So what I do actually is I more or less design and supervise the execution of different projects that are related to AI and big data for our B2B clients. And at the same time, in order just to see or to get in touch with me, I lecture at 2 different schools starting this year, K School of Madrid and EA Business School of Barcelona. And there's my LinkedIn address if you want to connect. So what I want to address, or what I want to talk about during this event. Please feel free to intervene anytime, raise your hand, or ask any question. If you see the talking points, what I want to talk about is what is IoT? What are the market trends? How do you connect everything, or how do you build an ecosystem? It's a recommended reading that I was talking about, and just at the end, this Q&A space. But feel free to intervene at any time, because I usually get tired of using my own voice or hearing my own voice. So let's get started. What is IoT? Okay, so we can have a formal definition of what is IoT. We can say that, for instance, it's a network of interconnected objects capable of collecting data through sensors, transmitting, processing, and able to make decisions in real time out of this data. Okay, so what does actually mean? We'll leave it for later. First of all, I want to start with a funny story, I believe, of how you can make history by being lazy. Okay, so this is something that happened in Cornell Mellon University. This is a a subsidiary of Pittsburgh in University in Pennsylvania. And in the 1980s, okay, there was this grad student who was actually working on his thesis, like many others, I reckon. And this guy was craving for a soda, but his office was at the other side of the campus, and it was quite a long walk in order to get to the Coke machine. So, out of laziness, out of the spite of not having to walk the I don't know, mile and a half that separated his office from the Coke machine, he invented a program and attached a couple of sensors to the soda machine in order to understand the status of the of the machine at every moment. So there's this program. Actually, what it did was ping or try to connect to the soda machine every few seconds, every a couple of times per second, and depending on the status of the soda cans, if it was refilled a couple of hours ago, if there was a purchase or anything, he will find the optimal moment in order to go grab the soda and go back to work. So just by doing this, this guy actually made history because it's the first recorded event or first recorded experiment in order to build what we know nowadays as an IoT project or an ecosystem. At the time, there was no term as IoT. There wasn't such a term. But what this guy did is he built like a machine-to-machine protocol in order to control remotely from his office this soda machine. It's stupid, I understand. But here we can actually see the potential, the business potential, the technological potential from that this kind of idea did. Okay, so now nearly 40 years later, we're just, I'm not saying starting, but we are really seeing how this is coming up together. Okay, but this is actually what I wanted to do is say, if you're lazy, don't feel free to experiment or feel free to do anything dumb, because you can actually be making history. Actually, there was a keynote by Bill Gates. I don't know if you know this guy, that he said that he will actually prefer to employ a lazy guy over a not lazy guy, equal terms of experience and so forth, because lazy guys or lazy people usually tend to do the same amount of job in an easier and faster way. So they are actually more productive. Well, so moving on, what is IoT? What's this Internet of Things? What does it mean? Okay, this means that what I will try to explain is that it is not a technological revolution, because as I just explained, this kind of ecosystems have been appearing since 1980, nearly 40 years from now, a little bit more. We're speaking about a business revolution, okay? And it's enabled by the technology, okay? So what kind of business revolution are we talking about right here? So you know that since a couple of years now, I'd rather say 2005 or 2006, there's this trend about the digital transformation, B2B, B2C, this kind of market, this kind of customers. But in reality, right now, well, this survey is from 2016, nearly 73% of the companies surveyed were actually involved in some kind of IoT project, initiative, or whatever. 60% of them were actually working with IoT in order to grow or in revenue or profit. This means there are 60% of the companies surveyed that they are actually building something, a product, a project, or any kind of service, new service, based on IoT technology or IoT related technology. And at the same time, 50% of these companies were using this kind of technology in order to reduce downtime in predictive maintenance, optimization, cost optimization, revenue optimization, through downtime in operations. Okay, so what does this really mean? This means that IoT is a huge opportunity. Okay, there was this paper by McKinsey, the McKinsey and Company Institute of Research, that predicted that by 2020, and I will put a quote mark on that, there will be 25 billion devices connected. Billion as in American billions. Okay, this means, again, let's take into account that 2020 was a really strange year. But what this paper wanted to say is that we're going to have a lot of things, and now we will explain what things mean. There's going to be a market value of 1.7 trillion dollars, and again, American dollars, but this is translated to European or metric system. This is millions of dollars by the International Data Company, and 70% of that value market will come from a B2B scenario. Okay, now we will see the market trend later, but this is actually huge. I mean, there's no other kind of topology or technological revolution right now in the market that can compete against the kind of projections or this kind of trends. Okay, we are really on the verge of something really that's gonna change the reality, if we do it correctly, of how we live and how we experience technology. Because this is going to get to the customer, to the final customer, but this is going to get to the companies also. Okay. Why now? Or let's say, how can we? Why is it the best moment in order to start with IoT, or why now? Okay. So we need to think of three factors: the cost of the electronics, sensors, chipset, devices, has had a downtown decrease in cost for the past 10 years and more, doubling, reducing at 50% cost every kind of electronic device. The bandwidth or the networking capabilities has increased exponentially 40 times in the last 10 years. This means that the price of the megabyte or the byte or the kilobyte through the net has really went down and gone down in cost. And at the same time, we have enhanced by nearly 60% the processing capabilities of our GPUs, CPUs, and so on and so forth. Microchips. You don't need to get really to big stuff. So what this means really is that right now, for instance, a GPS that 10 years ago would cost $2,000 a unit. Today you can get a device with GPS implanted for approximately $10 or even less. Okay, because this is from last year. At the same time, there are new net capabilities. So net capabilities in the sense that we have everybody is talking about 5G, but 5G is just another example of new technologies, new networking technologies. There's another example like LPWA, that is low, well, I can't remember this, but technologies and networking technologies more adapted to IoT use cases or IoT products. Okay, and at the same time, you can actually purchase a Raspberry Zero, which has this kind of a specification for nothing, pennies on a dollar. Even if you buy at a big scale, it's even cheaper. And with this kind of devices, you can actually start doing some really serious programming. I'm not only talking about doing some kind of silly programs that do like if-else statements or do like kind of loopholes. You can actually, with this kind of technology, you can really start doing some very interesting stuff with algorithms, with real-time processing, etc. Okay, so you need to take into account that we're right now at the moment where technology is ultra mega cheap. Therefore, it's enabling the viability of ideas that are not new. The ideas are, most of the time, they are not new, they're just cheaper. And therefore, we can really, the business case or the return, the investment return is really interesting right now. Okay, so this is basically the principal idea or the principal reason behind why we are talking so much about IoT right now. Okay, so this is actually what you're starting to see. Is not more. We will get into some technical aspects of IoT, but later in the event in the slides. But what I really try to cover here is that IoT is, and with the idea of the previous slide, the technology, we have reached a point where the technology is so cheap that now we can try to overcome or execute ideas that before that we had before, but they weren't as economically viable as right now. Okay, this is an example of why we can do this. Okay, the essential or the most common IoT device is your phone. If you think about it, is there's so many sensors. I mean, any kind of smartphone. This is not the newest one, okay? But with this, you can actually build a satellite. Okay, this is something that happened a few years ago. That an NASA team sent into space a smartphone. Was actually a bit tuned. There was some changes in the hardware and so on and so forth. But they actually sent a satellite using only a smartphone. So you can actually see that this is a huge, huge, huge opportunity for every kind of project. If you think about it, the first part of the experience in an IoT project or an IoT ecosystem is your smartphones and the app world that we have right now. I mean, through apps, we have enabled so many market opportunities, so many business opportunities that maybe 20 years ago were totally unthinkable. Not talking only about social media or texting or this kind of stuff. I mean, really, with your phone, you can actually do everything right now. I mean, me, myself, I lived without a personal computer for 1 year and a half, and I didn't miss it a bit. That up until I had to start working with something that really involved using a personal computer. But if not, I was just getting along very, very finely with just my phone. Banks, everything that I needed to manage in my personal life, I could do it throughout my phone. So, getting back to the idea of the slide, because I tend to divagate sometimes. What you see here is that you have a lot of sensors, a lot of chipset, a lot of computing power, network capabilities, and if you know your stuff and you know how to program iOS, Android, or whatever, you can actually build something pretty cool with just your smartphone. You don't need anything else. Okay, so how does this come together? And this is for me the key slide, to explain what is IoT. Okay, so this is actually coming from a paper review of business. Harvard Business School. Okay, so getting this example, I'm not going to read the text. This is just for you if you want to understand what the example is saying. But think of a local owner with just this tractor company. Okay, so this guy has a tractor. How does this become an IoT system? Okay, so first of all, you get your tractor. Same one. You don't need to change it. You can. You don't need to change it. Okay. You attach a processing unit. For instance, the Raspberry I spoke about before. And then you have a smart product because you can, with just this kind of capabilities, you can turn on, turn off. You have like something that can program some kind of logic to it. Okay. Next step, you have a smart connected product. If your tractor, your Raspberry, and then an antenna of some kind that can allow you some kind of network connection through the internet. You don't need any kind of virtual network, private network throughout the internet. Okay, so now I have my tractor is connected and I can program it. Okay, perfect. So next step, we have a lot of tractors connected. And right now, what I can do is if I have my own ecosystem of tractors connected and they are smart, okay, now I can build what I call an ecosystem or a system, okay, where I have my tractors working from one side. Maybe I have combine harvester, which is another kind of ecosystem. another kind of machine, sorry. I have planters. Imagine that you can sensorize, computerize, and connect different kind of equipment just from afar. Okay, that gives you a connected system. Okay, and therefore you can manage ideally. You can manage ideally your all your farm throughout just your a remote laptop, for instance. And maybe you can learn show your tractor how to drive, how to go through the field. Maybe you can schedule when it's going to go up, down, whatever. Okay. Next step, and this is where it really makes a difference, is how you build a system of systems. Okay, is when you have your farm equipment system connected to other systems that have other kind of uses, other kind of ideas, and they speak between them. Speaking in the sense that they share data, and the data shared between them allows them to understand and enrich the experience that they or what they need to do. Okay, so for instance, I'm not going to go through the entire diagram, but just for instance with the weather data system. Okay, so for instance, if you have a lot of different machines connected within the farm equipment system connected to this other weather data system, you can understand schedule, you can think, well, there's a lot of different use cases that you can do. And just by connecting different systems to it, it really gives you a new capability that you couldn't do with obviously your initial product. And through an IoTization process, and this is a term that some people use, it's not actually a standard, so don't try to use it maybe outside some kind of forums. Through this process of IoTization, you can actually build a complex system, a system of systems that through technology of processing, connection, and smart or intelligence, you have an IoT system. Okay, so this is the transition between having something that it shouldn't, that is not intended to work alone, through a totally intelligent, connected, and programmable system of work. Okay, so no, this doesn't answer completely the question of what is IoT, in the sense that okay, this is a business revolution. Okay, we can agree on that. But what do we mean by IoT? IoT is this is the connecting things, and by things we can mean a tractor, a combine harvester, or a planter, or whatever you can imagine, connected, learning from each other, because in not from an artificial intelligence point of view, it's important that every different tractor, for instance, learns information about that tractor in particular. What typically what we do in AI is for every different kind of machine, equipment, let's say product, we develop a specific algorithm, normally, typically, that only learns about these kind of products. With IoT or with this kind of systems of systems, we go a step further. And what we do is that because we can share information between different systems, between different products, or between different connected things, and this is why we call them things, we can actually learn. We can choose not to, but we can actually learn, or we can introduce new data in order to build more complex, more efficient systems. So this is the idea behind IoT from a technological point of view, is connecting everything you can, your ashtray, your fridge, whatever you can imagine, and make them share information. Let them speak between themselves. Okay. Obviously, you need to supervise everything. You need to understand what they are saying in order to get extract a value from that. But just because by connecting them and making them share all this information, and we will see how, you're actually gaining a lot of potential in order to build crazy ideas like the new farm 5.0. This is actually an idea There's no people involved, no crew involved, other than people that technicians that need to repair sensors and so on and so forth. So crazy ideas. And now it's the moment where you can start dreaming or dusting off those old ideas that, oh, so we can actually build a city in the sky. We're not there yet, but there's actually some truth to it. Okay. So what are the market trends, or what does the market say about this? Okay, I'm going to go through the slide very, very quickly. You don't need to focus really on the details here, but what I want to say is that now understanding that we are talking about a lot of different things connected to each other, we need to understand that IoT, you can approach an IoT project as a global sum or a total sum of different projects. So you need to understand how every single part of that project, so for instance, the electronic part, the networking part, the processing part, or the intelligence part, how it's behaving market-wise. Okay, so first of all, in the big data, and this is, you can see where the big data comes in, because if you have so many things connected, it's going to generate a huge volume of data. You can see that the projection from Statista for 2020 2027, yeah, right, in billions of dollars is around 103 billion dollars. Okay, it's a bit modest in compared to the projection of IDC that I showed you previously, but this is actually huge. This is only for the United States. At the same time, analytically, or from an analytical point of view, data science, data analytics, all these data people that is coming out now, we have so many data people in general that it's actually becoming ridiculous. But well, you can see that this statistic, it was published by IBM in 2017, so it's a bit old, but I think it more or less stays true. There are so many openings from a data science point of view, from the intelligence point of view. There's so many different applications that you can do. So the jobs are actually, there's a huge market here for people that want to work with data, not only to manipulate them, but to extract this information, to understand what it's saying, and in order to build this new or crazy ideas from the data that you're connecting. Okay, where does this fit in right now, market-wise, for maybe young people that are coming out of college? Obviously, there's a lot of reskilling and upskilling that you can do to people that are already working in something related to this. But if you can see, and this is the part here in this part of the slide, there's actually a huge gap between the business or the job opportunity that is predicted for 2021 compared to the people that are actually graduating from computer science and related projects. So there's actually a huge job market for people in this kind of world. Okay, and this is this fourth graph is just the typical representation of how we are having so much data compared to previous years, exponential growth. I mean, if you work in this kind of world, or even if you don't, you understand that right now there's so much amount of information being generated. Not only information in the sense that people share emails or they publish information, or there's so much media, social media, but actually everything that for instance, your phone does, your computer does, the data that is sending throughout the internet is actually enormous. If you can see the difference, really, this graph doesn't show it, but it's more or less true. Nearly 80, I would say 85% of the data generated, it's event-related objects. So for instance, unstructured data, everything that your phone is doing, you're tracking, when you watch a series through Netflix, all that unstructured data, which afterwards is really hard to work with, is really, how to say, this is actually a big part of the data that is generated today. So there's a big market, job market for people that are interested in this. Where can we find, or where's really the source? Okay, so let's these two next slides are trying to understand what kind of the topology of the different type of projects or business ideas that you can approach through IoT. Okay, so the first of all is the human part. Human in the sense that are related to people like us, that are the ideas like wearables, like so for instance, one of the examples actually is wearables, all this part of human health, wellness, everything that is related to our quality of life directly through technology, or to keeping up with ourselves, to stay in shape. This is the category that we call human. Okay, everything that is home related, uh, smart buildings, smart fridge, everything that is related to, I don't know, just the heat temperature controller or something like this, security systems, whatever. This is what we fit into the home category. Retail, of course. I mean, every shop now there's. I didn't knew this before working here in this part of Telefonica, but there's actually some crazy ideas that actually make sense in the retail environment. For instance, uh, controlling the amount of intensity of the lights in depending on how many people are in the for instance, if you have a shop, or the trend of the music of the environmental music, depending on the typology of customers that you have right now. Let's say in the morning you have people within the age range of 40, 50 to your shop, sorry, in your shop, but in the afternoon it's the young people, for instance, 20 to 35, for instance. You can actually automatically, with some kind of effort and some kind of product, you can actually manage this kind of environment and more crazy ideas. Okay, so but there's actually a huge market for this. Everything that is related to office wise, obviously this made sense before COVID, and it still makes sense now, in the sense of now that we have offices or workspace that are medium, half full, people are not going or not using the offices so much because of COVID. So actually the energy optimization or the energy consumption optimization that you can do here is actually pretty interesting from an economic point of view. Next one is the everything that is related to factories or industry 4.0. Okay, I'm not going to go into that particular terminology or term, because again it's a huge thing and we can go on and on about this. Everything that is related to work sites, offshore work sites. So for instance, an oil company or something, you would think that this is okay, not so interesting, but it makes a lot of sense to speak about IoT and anything related to mining, to oiling, to gas, to construction, to everything. Okay, vehicles. Everybody, I think, knows Tesla, or everybody at least has heard of it. I will later show a slide showing how many things there's in a Tesla car. So there's obviously a new market for this, or a new business opportunity IoT related for vehicles, smart cities. There's actually I think Stockholm, you guys, is actually have some very interesting smart city examples. I read a review of how they were working and the different use cases that you had. Is actually pretty interesting, and again amazing how, again, the the Nordic countries are, for me, always one step ahead, but it's really interesting what you guys have up there. Okay, and lastly, this category of outside. Okay, so everything that's related to shipping, to sea tracking, to sea shipping, and so on and so forth. Okay, so having this in mind, these different categories, and I'm sorry I had to go through each and every one of them. I want to show this next slide, bearing in mind the the stats that I talked about before. Okay, so I will rather spend I will prefer explain this before going to the other part. Okay, so you can see that most of the economic potential or the business opportunity for that 1.7 trillion dollars is actually in the industry. So actually, for the human or health related projects, IoT project, there's not so much of a opportunity here. Obviously, you have differences between the low estimate and the high estimate, but actually, you can see that the three main things that you can, if you have any kind of business idea or you have a business plan, if you direct your efforts to Industry 4.0, smart cities, or retail environment, it's actually going to go very, very good. Also, the shipping and the outside category. But again, this is a very complex world because if you don't own a boat, it's going to be very difficult to get into this kind of market. Okay, but again, just to show you that everything that you think, okay, this is gonna be so, there's gonna be so much impact for me, for my home, for my health, and so on and so forth. There's actually not much of a business opportunity. The efforts of IoTization are going to go essentially to the B2B market, not to the final customer. Okay. Uh, another 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 forum, the Frontier Economics newspaper magazine, sorry, published in 2018 approaching IoT as a machine-to-machine connection. Machine-to-machine, it's the example I talked about before of the guy at the soda machine. That was an example of a M2M type of connection or M2M type of project. We are not really speaking about analytics or artificial intelligence here. It's just the connection and the interaction between two machines. If you approach that just by doing or proxies by these kind of projects, the IoT investment predicted for the next years from 2018 to 2032, yeah, that's the one. In billions of dollars again. You have two examples, United States and Germany. Germany, I mean, it's right here. It's here in Europe, and you can see that we are not talking about United States anymore. It's actually here in the European Union. I mean, these are two examples. Obviously, you have the UK, France, all the Nordic countries. There's a huge potential investment for this kind of projects. Again, this is an example because this is only saying everything that is related to machine-to-machine connection. But again, you can get a pretty good picture of what's happening. So before going to the next slide, what I try to convey here, or what I'm trying to explain here, is that there's a huge, although I understand that now we have this pandemic situation and it's not the best moment maybe to launch a startup, but actually there's a huge market for it. If you're interested in IoT, you have a business idea, the numbers show that there's a huge opportunity for investment, a huge opportunity for growth. Just pick whatever you think might be the best course of action, but there's actually a lot of money to make here. Okay, money to make, technology to explore, and lives to change eventually. Because everything that you do has an impact. Take as an example, everything related to smart cities. Maybe you don't care so much about cost optimization, about the lighting settings of the city, maybe. But through this kind of small initiatives, connecting everything again, we're going back to the farming example. We're going back to an ecosystem, a system of systems. Okay, now we have to digitalize this, and then we have to digitalize that, and so on and so forth. But at the end, you're going to have a complex system that is going to indirectly and directly is going to move you. It's going to change you in some kind of ways. Okay. Essentially, what you want to do here, or what you should expect, is that we're not going to be like, for instance, in the film Wall-E, where everybody is just lying around in some chairs and everything is done for us. I don't think that is going to happen in the short term, who knows? But there's some thinking that think about how much you depend on your phone nowadays, your smartphone, and how to do your life without it. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, really, because with this kind of technology, with this kind of empowerment, there's so many potential changes right now that that you should expect something as stupid for us as having a TV. That right now for us is something that everybody has. It. There's no mystery around it. Maybe your children or your grandchildren are going to ask you, "But Dad, Granddad, how did you do or how did you manage without?" Maybe that kind of the sentence is your idea. Okay, so this is really an encouragement in order to pursue any crazy idea, anything that you thought might or might not be possible. Check again the economics, the cost of technology, because actually you can make things happen. Okay. So this said, what are the mistakes to avoid? Again, from this from this Harvard Business magazine, from this point of view. Okay, and this is most of the time is common sense, but just to put it out there. Okay, so don't really add any kind of features or functionalities that your customers are not going to pay for it. Okay, this is for me. I mean, that's a no-brainer for me. But in any case, just to say it, you need to always make sure that you are not taking any risks in security wise, because there's a lot of hacking. Uh, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of damage to be made through hacking, through obtaining your data, publishing out there. From a reputation point of view, a corporation image point of view, from your own operation or your own game, from that point of view also. So always think in terms of security in order to make your next step. Uh, don't don't wait so much in order to see how the competition moves. Okay, because whenever there's an idea, there's gonna be so many people trying to pursue that idea, unless it's your new idea and you're going to change the world. But usually that's not the case. Okay, if you have an idea, go for it. I mean, don't be the first one to launch maybe the new device that is gonna substitute the mobile phone. Maybe that's not gonna work, but don't wait too much in order to have an established market, because then again you have so many competitors. Then again you have so many big companies that can do this kind of investment or this kind of or they can venture into this kind of projects without so much damage to themselves. I mean, the R&D departments and so on and so forth from the big companies can make an investment in this kind of technology. You see that it's very cheap, that there's a market for it, and that there's a lot of. I mean, just talking about the big four. For me, the big four are Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Google. They're obviously all over the. Okay, so they whatever you think you can might do, maybe they haven't figured it out yet, but they will soon. Okay, so don't wait too much. Don't overestimate your internal capabilities. If you're starting from the ground up, this doesn't apply to you. But if you work for a company and you think that you can approach something, think twice, because really you need to understand that there's a new shift, that everything is changing so quickly that maybe with you, if you think that, okay, my team and I can do this can approach this kind of project, think again, okay? Because there's a lot to learn. Now I'm going to show you some slide of how many things or how many players we have in this IoT world, okay? So this is just a small word in order to it's a heads up, just to think about. Okay. Now the fun part for me. Okay. How does this come together? Okay. So we talked about the market trends. We talked about IoT, but how do you really build an ecosystem? How do you really connect things? Okay. First of all, for me, it has 4 essential steps. You collect the data. You connect everything, as I've said numerous times repeatedly before. You process the information and you extract the knowledge. It is very simple, and this is a very clear path. But what do you need to take into account? Okay, or how does everything come into together? Okay, so now we start with the onion. Okay, you don't see the onion yet, but you will. Okay, starting from the ground up. Okay, first of all, what you need to think about is about the chipset and the devices. What's a chipset? Chipset is really the basis, the structural basis of any IoT-related project, initiative, product, whatever you want to call it. This is really there's no formal definition of what a chipset is. It's just the smallest amount of electronic equipment that you can put into something in order to digitalize a product or an asset. Okay, you need to think in so many terms. You need to think if you buy something very cheap, uh, but it doesn't really offer you many features, it might not suit your use case. Okay, so you need to always think ahead and think that it might or might not your chipset be capable of absorbing new technology, IoT like IoT wise. Okay, why do I say this? Because actually there's a lot of probes sent to Mars right now. Okay, just as an example, so many satellites, so many connected things sent to Mars right now. Why? Because the hardware that we are going to use in 10 years time is going to be the same, more or less, hardware that we're going to use today, or we are capable of manufacturing today, more or less, or what essentially what we need in 10 years time we can produce right now. Okay, what we can do and what we need those 10 years to why do we have to wait is to build things on top of that, all the networking, all the intelligence, everything that is connected or software related. Okay, hardware is very easy and very cheap to design. Okay, and even so, if you buy at scale, I mean, it's incredibly cheap. So you can actually send stuff to space, thinking that okay, this is going to reach Mars in 5 years time. Okay, so now I have 5 years in order to build what I want to build, my functionalities, starting from now. Obviously, you should start before, but now I have a 5 year deadline because I know already what the hardware that I need or what I'm able to build is already on its way. You don't need to wait right now, and you don't need to wait in order to have your software developed. Software, this is here I'm including all the processing part, all the networking stuff, all the intelligence, because that you can do along the way. Okay, so always keep in mind that you need to buy or you need to acquire some kind of chipset that will enable to do all this kind of IoT features on top. Okay, always think in terms of buying at scale. Don't think that maybe okay, I can do my business case with just one Raspberry Pi. Maybe that's not suited for you. Okay, so you need to think in terms of okay, I can do a couple of scenarios where I can do maybe with one chipset, maybe with 10 chipsets, and maybe with 10,000 chipsets, to see the economy and how you can really approach this part. Okay, not going through every single point, but for me, the key point really is the simplicity. Everything is easier if you keep the hardware part easy and you make the logic on top of it complicated or complex. It's very very easy to manufacture. Okay, this is for the chipset part. For the device part, or what we call sensors and actuators, there's a difference. A sensor is, and this is this diagram. There are so many sensors that we can build right now, from an optical point of view to capture images, from a chemical point of view in order to detect gas leaks and so on so forth, acoustic flow. There's so many materials right now that you can work with in order to capture the information. That is actually nearly every sensor that you're going to need in the next 20 years is already exist. Okay, and the actuator is the other part, because a sensor, what does it do? It captures data. But if through a process of IoT you capture information and you want to act on it, so for instance, I'm sensing that some kind of pressure because the roof is falling down or coming down. You can through an actuator, you can actually inject some kind of power in order to apply a relief, some kind of relief in order to relieve the pressure. So there's a difference between collecting and acting on the data. Okay. Next slide. And here's maybe where you can see the onion. Okay. So once we have the chipset, then we have the IoT comms. Okay. Everybody's talking about 5G, which will be included in this part of the GSM standard. Everything is going to be so much better throughout 5G. Okay, maybe, but maybe there are some technologies, networking technologies, that you might not know or you might haven't think about that can enable you, depending on your use case, to connect the things. Okay, so you need to choose the right technology based on the spectrum that you want to act on. The battery duration, it is very, very, very important because not all the communication technology consume the same kind of amount of battery. This is very, very important. Obviously, the throughput is not the same. Just sending tiny bits of information through the net that's sending an image or sending a huge pile of information in order to process. So this is something you need to think about. The cost of the communication itself, if it's a free standard, if it's there's some kind of royalty that you need to pay, how it comes up in your ecosystem, how do you connect your chipset and the other parts of your IoT ecosystem through this technology, because this is actually the channel. This is here you're choosing how am I gonna make everything talk to each other. So this is a very important part. Again, I'm not going to go through every different through every possibility. This is just one of the few. I invite you to check them out all out. But actually, if you work in a building and you're thinking of about an IoT project that is related to smart building, if you have a router in your building, you don't need to do any kind of com work. You can already use what you have. The same applies to mobile phone or a smartphone. You already have Bluetooth. Most of these guys already have NFC, RFID, GSM. So think about it. You don't really need to buy a new antenna in order to approach your IoT use case. Next, new layer of the onion. And this is just ridiculous. The amount of players, the amount of different options you have for processing or to build your IoT platform. I mean, this is just one example, but actually, if you go, this is a very, very selected image. There's actually a huge, huge variety of vendors. And here, if you see this, I think, for instance, Amazon, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform is not included. There's also IBM, Siemens, so many, okay? Nearly every single vendor of IoT related stuff has its own IoT platform. So this is becoming kind of a migrate for people who have to choose and design this kind of projects, okay? What I want to say here is that you can classify this through this topology, but you need to choose, or you need to understand what you need to do through your IoT platform. Are you only going to gather data? Are you going to process the data there? And you should. Are you going to, we will not talk about this, but are you going to design an IoT project based on edge technology? And this is something I'm not going to get into, but it's really, really interesting. So think about the capabilities that you need from your platform, from this point of view, okay? What you need to manage, what you need to, what are you going to leave to the devices, to everything that is attached to an asset, and what you want to control from a centralized point of view, okay? On top of this, the analytics, okay? So this is an example of a warehouse, a shipping business, okay? Through big data processing and artificial intelligence, there's so many things you can do, okay? So imagine that you have this kind of company, for instance. You have this warehouse where you can send stuff to different factories, so the factories can send you stuff in order to keep in a warehouse, depending on your kind of business. You can have some kind of control, and you can actually have this without applying any kind of IoT through a dashboard controlling or through a monitoring process. Okay, again, shipping, maybe sending through an airplane or through sky, sea, whatever. Okay. Now, if we apply uh, big data and artificial intelligence through sensoring and connectivity, we get a data-driven decision business. Okay, data-driven decision. This is actually something that we lecture about here in Telefonica. It means that your company is making decisions or business decision based on what the data is saying. Most of the time, what business do is or decide is based on the experience, the experience through the business development department, through the commercial point of view, from an operation point of view. But there's so few companies nowadays that actually make the decisions based on what the data is saying. One example again is Netflix, for instance. Netflix only works or only produces content based on what the rank on the ranking data is saying. And for instance, nowadays we are very keeping the example of Netflix, and I will come back to this. Netflix was the first streaming platform that decided to do an experiment. Is I have bought the rights to this television series, to the sitcom, and instead of releasing this series step by step, chapter by chapter, so to speak, or movie by movie or whatever, what I'm going to do is I'm going to release everything. Okay, so in the first one to enable you to binge watch in the entire Game of Thrones season, for instance, it was actually Netflix. And through that kind of experimentation, through that kind of response, and they saw that obviously people, when they have a free weekend, they can binge watch so many stuff. They decided to produce this kind of content and release this kind of content based only on what they experimented. And obviously, the rest of the platforms, Disney Plus, HBO, you name it, are doing the same things. But the first one to do this kind of stuff were Netflix, and this was through experimentation and through the data. And Netflix doesn't do any kind of active surveys other than please rate our app or what do you think of this content. But just because what the users say, what the users watch, or what the users do, this is when they decide what to do next, what kind of content to produce, what kind of recommendations give to the users, so on and so forth. So this is an example of a data-driven decision company. So coming back to the example of this shipping company, there are so many use cases that you can do connecting everything to a centralized platform. Okay, so there are so many use cases. For instance, you can automatize or have a full automatization within your warehouse. You can see these robots in the Amazon warehouses where they move everything, they ship everything, and you only see the robots moving packages and so on and so forth. This can be done through IoT. Deciding or having an optimal routing, predicting when is the best to do some kind of shipment or routing. Again, connecting everything through your dashboard. Maybe your dashboard right now is the essential tool to your business because you can control everything. Even from a point of view that you can optimize the flight schedule. If you have a shipping company that has maybe some kind of plane or some kind of boats, you can actually decide by applying intelligence, you can manage the schedule in order to optimize, because every time you have a ship that is going half full, Germany to Poland forever, for instance, that's gonna cost you money. So through this kind of intelligence, you can work on so many angles within your company. Okay, this is just some examples of this. This one, the real-time monitoring. You have this with some kind of enterprises, some kind of companies. For instance, if you have the Amazon Prime and you have and you buy something, you can actually see in real time, or so to speak, real time, where your packages. Okay, and that's enabled through an IoT and analytic process. Okay. On top of that, and to sum it up, okay, the security. I talked before about the security and how it's important not to make this mistake. Okay, not to assume that everything is gonna go okay, because there's actually a standard created by the OWASP project. This project that I've shown you, I've left you the references down there. These guys actually what they do is they analyze from a security point of view the different threats that you can have through the topology of your business. Okay, assuming that IoT is a unique business or a unique topology of technology, they are top 10 for every different thing. So for instance, there's another for apps, there's another for don't know, whatever. Okay, so in 2008 these guys made a ranking of the top 10 weaknesses or security threats that I'm just going to leave them there. I'm not going to explain them or not going to go into them, but you can see that there's a lot of things to take into account before starting to implement your own project. So through this onion, and this is what I call the onion, maybe if you didn't see it before, these are the different layers of an IoT project, an IoT ecosystem, and how they come together. Okay, so here we can see where the electronic fits, where the 5G fits, where the big data and AI fits, cybersecurity. So you can see that there are many things that connect to each other. Who knows, maybe tomorrow they can relate or connect easily to a blockchain project, but we are not going to talk about this today. Okay, so just keep it into account. Just as an example, I'm going to show you how many companies are involved in a Tesla car. Okay, knowing that obviously Tesla is manufacturing the car, so many different companies are in charge of so many different parts of the car. Okay, you know that Tesla is actually not a vehicle company; it's a big data company that produces vehicles. It's just like McDonald's. McDonald's is not a burger franchise. It's actually an immobiliary company that sells burgers. So they do the same. Okay, and to see so many things involved into a project, you will think, okay, Tesla guys are amazing. They do this by themselves. No, there. What I want to convey here is that obviously you can try to approach and the end-to-end of an IoT project, but there are so many partners, there are so many companies that already do things that you want to do maybe better than you can do them. Okay, so think about IoT as a world where you need to have connections, where you cannot do everything by yourself. You can try. Okay? You're totally entitled, but there are so many things to think about, so many aspects, that it's a good thing that you have an ecosystem of partners or you have an ecosystem of companies identified to help you bring along everything from the electronic point of view, from the connectivity point of view, everything. Okay, professional services, whatever you name. Okay, so the message here is, okay, you can specialize in one part of an IoT project. If you want to build a new product, maybe don't try to build it from the ground up by starting with the mechanics of building the electronic plate. There's already a guy that does that, cheaper than you will. Okay, so think of IoT as a world where companies that might be in competition with each other need to understand each other in order to build stuff. You this, and you do this, and I will do this, and so on and so forth. And we need to have an understanding. Okay, but this is what I wanted to cover. Okay. Essentially, I've finished my lecture up to this point. Okay, it's been 1 hour talking by myself. It's been quite exhausting because I don't really like the sound of my voice. But just before leaving, I wanted to talk to you about the recommended reading. Okay, so this is the book I told you about. I actually have it here somewhere. Yeah, just to prove to you guys that I bought it. This book actually gave me a pretty big idea of how big this new third wave is. Okay, this is taken from the first page of the book. Actually, the division between the three ways that this man Steve Case sees or reckoned. Okay, so first way, building the internet. You have these companies, Apple, everybody knows this. IBM, they are clinging today to stay more or less known. Cisco, okay. AOL, America Online, which was the company that Steve Case founded. I was CEO of. I think they don't exist nowadays as AOL. They merged together with Warner Time Productions, and I don't know how they're doing, but more or less. Okay, so you can see this, what I will kindly call them dinosaurs of the internet in this second wave from 2000 to 2015. All the big players, Amazon, Facebook, Snapchat, Google, Twitter, Waze, you name it. Okay, this is all within the app economy and within the mobile revolution. Okay, and since 2016 until who knows, there's this internet of everything. There's this opportunity to connect everything and to build something based on the things that already happened in the first 2 weeks. Okay, so again, the message here is dare to dare to dream or dare to think in new ideas, because it might be the best time for you to go ahead with them. So without any further ado, and I'm going to, please allow me, are there any questions?
I have a comment actually.
Mm-hmm.
Just while the participants are thinking about the questions. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, thank you so much for giving the lecture. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that if anyone after this speech, if anyone decides to have a startup, please let us know and please credit Joaquin, because I feel like it was very inspirational. And to be very honest, Tish and I we just exchanged a few messages. For those who don't know, Tish is the president of Hub AI. That maybe Hub AI needs to become a startup or something and just work with IoT. So thanks a lot for the inspiration. And just to get the conversation going, I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of my own studies. And it's interesting how these days this technology gives us an opportunity not only to maximize profits as a company, but also to reduce some of our environmental impacts without
Mm-hmm.
having to resort to greenwashing as
Mm-hmm.
companies like to do it. So, for example, energy efficiency and reducing the food waste. There was
Mm-hmm.
a really interesting project that IBM is working on. They were putting the IoT sensors in the containers that are moving food. I think it's called IBM Food Trust or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then they're tracking the real-time temperature in the containers in order
Mm-hmm.
to account for the fluctuations and make sure that food doesn't go to waste.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, companies are not only saving the food, as we know it's a big problem, but also earning money. And this leads to my question. So I don't know how much you can say, but from your own experience, how many companies actually come into you and ask you to help them with a project that aims at reducing the amount of resources they are using, or maybe energy, compared to as a goal compared to profit maximization? So what do they say first? Do they say first, hey, we want to maximize our profits, or do they say we want to reduce
There's
the footprint?
and I understand the question. I think that most of the time, and I would say most of the time, but not all times, what drives the necessity or the ideas is driven by the economics. It's driven by the idea of reducing here, or I have this kind of problem that is costing me so much money. How can you help me? Okay. There's another part where there's this image, reputation, corporation image, and so on and so forth. In order to become green or becoming accepting, maybe 10 in terms of equality, so on and so forth. So there's so much publicity to be made out of this also. So you have to understand these two drivers. Okay, but most of the time it comes from an economic point of view. It doesn't mean that it's actually something bad. Okay, because you need to understand that most of the problems that we address is something related to a problem that the final customer has. The final customer is always identifying new opportunities in order to bring IoT, big data, AI, and so forth, and is related to the topics that matter to the clients. Because if a company doesn't have any ideas based on the client's need, it's stale. It doesn't do anything. Okay, so it's not dynamic. In order to answer your question, not from my particular experience, but here in Telefonica, we actually have a product aiming for this kind of reduction and aim energy optimization. So we actually, although we have a lot of initiatives throughout the company, we have actually in my company, we have a product called Smart Energy that actually aims to help companies again improving the energy consumption, therefore buying less energy or consuming less energy and becoming more green. So we have this kind of issue.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to underline. So I asked this question because I think it's really cool times we live in, because companies don't actually need to find a trade-off. And while they're improving their economic opportunities, these kinds of technologies are actually giving them a chance to become more sustainable. And yeah, it's just something I'm interested in, because I did my bachelor's in business and now I'm doing sustainability. So, but I think that we need to emphasize that the floor is open for more questions. I also don't want to be the only person to, to ask a lot of things, because I
It's
always
just
do.
okay. It's okay. I if you ask questions, then I might be afraid to not be able to answer, because this speech, I mean, I'm happy to speak about any kind of part of what I just said, but I'm not the best expert or the most expert in some of the topics.
Nobody is the best expert.
I know, just
So.
false modesty.
Yeah, if I may start, thank you, Joaquin, for such an interesting talk. I have a bunch of questions, and they may be a bit technical. So,
sure, go ahead.
So I'm trying to understand the pipeline, right, and how you're building the ecosystem. So, how does learning occur for connected devices? If you can maybe.
What do you understand by learning?
Like machine learning or learning for devices. So how they're understanding their.
So what do you need for a? I will refer in terms of project, but you can obviously take this to any kind of scenario you want. What do you need for an analytical or from an AI project? You need data. You need a purpose. Okay, so you need these two factors. The driver usually is a business product or a business or something you want to tackle from a data point of view. So what you need to actually do is, I mean, you don't need to build, if you're only aiming at into learning stuff or extracting insights, you can do with the data. Once you have the data collected and you can purchase data, you can obtain data through many parts of the internet. You only apply the algorithms you want, the insights, the business intelligence queries you want, that you can obtain data. Learning, for me, is a different process because you can obtain insights, and that's what this kind of things do. But this kind of projects will do. Learning is understanding what the data is saying, not only the insight, because okay, you can see a curve, you can see a chart, you can see something, but for me, learning is understanding what the data is not implying, or what the data is implying but not saying. Okay, so for instance, if you see, I'm not very good at making examples up, but if you see a trend, if you see something, you need to understand it in terms of your own business point of view. Taking back to the question that you said before, so how does this work? If you have a totally built ecosystem, let's say the farm, okay? If you want to make that the tractor drives on its own. Okay, so have the new Tesla for tractors that exists, by the way. Yeah. What you need to do is, first of all, you need to connect them. So you need to have this computer, so to speak, in the machine. You need to be able to connect it, so it be able to send data to another place. And this place can be a cloud computing environment. It can be to your laptop, wherever you want it. You just are going to receive the data. Once you have the data, you need to process it, again, using your computer and your computing capabilities, building the algorithm you want. So you need to, depending on your use case, you need to have so many sensors, so many cameras, so many actuators in order to, not the actuators, just the sensorical part of the electronic. And you collect all this data, and then you can start doing the learning, so to speak. Okay. The funny thing is that is when you already have the knowledge, and how do you apply it? How does it go back? Okay. So you need another kind of pipeline, so to speak, that based on what a model and an AI is saying, it needs to apply into the physical world. Okay. So you need another downstream of data that is the decision, the idea, from the chipset, the cloud computer environment, your PC, laptop, whatever, to the actuator that it's maybe moving the steering wheel, or maybe the gear, whatever. Okay, so you need to think in terms of upstream and downstream. Does this answer your question? Or?
Yeah, perfect. I was really curious about it, how that, especially with the tractor example, how it works. And I'm also thinking, like, okay, there are several devices that are connected, and perhaps they're not in the same location, right? Or maybe they don't have the same standards or same sort of connectivity. So how do you deal with that? For example, signal strength, power, etc., etc.
So again, depending on what you try to accomplish, let's take an example. Let's take, and this is something I worked on a couple of years ago. Let's say that you are in charge of a security company. Okay, so you have all these residences, houses connected, and you have the sensors that are detecting motion or blackouts or whatever. Okay, when you see that something, let's say one house or one collective of the houses, let's say a city, and this part of town is actually not working properly, you have two questions to ask. Is it because my devices are not correct? Okay, so I have built a specific hardware in order to apply in every single home, and for some reason that I don't understand, this is not working right here at this point? Or am I reading something else? Am I reading that this this part of the city, for whatever reason, is working with something that I didn't understand before, or there's something that I didn't take into account? And then you need to reapply some kind of correcting things. It can be logical, or it can be from a physical point of view. Don't know if this answers your question.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, like, in the beginning, you kind of have a plan for the whole ecosystem, and then if there are changes, and you adapt to it. Like, if I understood.
Like in any project, I mean, this is obviously yes, for sure. I mean, what you need to, a good methodology in order to think how to build a project is doing it by phases, and very differentiated phases. Let's say, do you remember maybe the Google Lens? This lenses that they have this little camera on the screen here. There were actually several phases before having the Google Lens itself. Okay, so the first proof of concept, it was the CEO. I can't remember his name, but the CEO at the time asked, "Can we do this?" Okay, so I have this idea. Can we actually have glasses connected to something? And the guys, the R&D guys, they actually built a prototype within that day. They attached a laptop, a couple of wires, they connected the camera, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the idea behind what we want to achieve. Okay, so this is the first step. So proof of concept or proof of viability is the first step that you want to do. maybe with a couple of rusty things, whatever you can reach or you can grab within your environment, in order to see if this is viable, in order to understand if this is correct. Next step, what they did is that, okay, we are going to build our first prototype, but I don't want to carry a backpack around, so I'm going to build this huge computer that it weighs a ton, and I'm going to have it attached to my ear, but it's okay. And they bought around 100 units of a complete equipment of some classes like yours. So I have classes too, but I don't have it with me. Again, the device, it was a small computer here, and in order to understand if the experience will work, if they connect, if they okay, this might be a phase of prototype, and you understand if there's a business attraction to it. And finally, you can do this as partially as you want. But what they finally did is that they did the big release without doing a real screening of the market if there was a real necessity for it. The problem with Google, Apple, and this kind of people, and it's not really a problem, but from a business point of view, it's a problem, is that they create a lot, they innovate, they build, they create this amazing stuff, but most of the time they don't understand if it's going to work or not. They just do it. Okay, we believe that this has there's no market need, there's no need for it because it doesn't exist. So they dare to try something out. And in the case of the Google Lens, they actually did. Either you go on the street and ask people one by one, hey, do you want something that does this? There's actually no need for this. And I was really sad that they didn't continue the project because I wanted one. But you see that there are several stages, or there's a methodology that you can continue in order not to go ahead and buy 10,000 of this. You can actually do it step by step.
Yeah, I still wonder whatever happened to the Google Glass anyways.
I think it wasn't economically sustainable.
So. Yeah. Last question. So you mentioned that there are like a lot of companies and a lot of things that are going on within this IoT world. Mm-hmm. My question is, like, why isn't there a standardized platform for
now
IoT?
That's the question.
Yeah.
How do you acquire a standard? Because there's a consensus on how we are going to build stuff or how we are going to do something. But if in the case that every vendor, whatever part of the technology of an IoT project, has his own platform or has his own system to manage a part of the project, how are you going to be able to speak to all of them at once and say, please, we need to focus, or we need to think about in terms of standards? So this is actually the impossible question in terms of IoT. There's no, without a standard, we have a problem that is the vendor locking, because actually with the vendor locking, the problem is that you cannot shift from one company to another with the same kind of equipment, the same kind of technology. You need to buy new stuff. Since there's no actual plea or no actual fight against vendor locking at this scale, we don't have really the necessity or the demand from a customer point of view, or from the final intermediate customer point of view, to have a standard. And that's really, for me, what's going to drive it. Once we have enough problems, legal problems, with this kind of vendor locking, is then when people will start thinking, okay, let's try to have a standard or agree on some kind of terminology or middle ground. But who is going to take the lead? That's the question. Because maybe you have the idea of making a standard, but how are you going to tell Amazon to follow your rules or to follow what you do? They might not be so happy to do so.
Yeah, but like if Amazon develops a standard that maybe other companies are gonna follow, then
yeah, but
it may
why
be something.
Why do this? When? And it might actually come from Google, Amazon, whoever. But why do this when I can actually have this kind of vendor locking problem in my favor? Okay. So it's a purely yes. I mean, I can really. I don't want to get very political into this, but it's for me a way to sum it up.
I see.
And very nice question. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm not a technical person, but regarding the standards, I guess it makes more sense when it comes to consumer products. So when they're developing network types and like 5G and things like that, because you have to have accessible phones and everybody has to purchase, the related technology. But unless many companies, I guess, are involved in some kind of huge system of systems, probably it's not going to happen because it makes no sense for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
It's a very complicated problem. Like you say, it's you need to have a very huge driver in order to have a standard, and there's no real necessity for a standard. There is from a technology point of view in order to avoid redoing stuff over and over again. But from a business point of view, producing something, there's no problem. You can either buy my product or go next door and buy his product, and we don't care about this. Obviously, there is a middle ground, no standard, but there's a middle ground and a consensus on some topics. Okay, but there's no actual standard for IoT.
Yeah.
Nor I think there will, like you said.
but I guess many things don't need standards. Like you have intellectual property rights to kind of document some changes and innovations within the product or process.
Yeah.
And then otherwise you just like update yourself on what's happening and goes from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I understand what you say, but that's more like kind of features to a big project itself. I mean, from a project, a system of systems point of view, there's so many scenarios that trying to build a standard, it's vastly complicated.
Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for the comments and answers. I'm wondering if anybody else has any more questions, maybe Tish or Lily. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk, Joaquin. It was really, really interesting. I had a few comments too, but I'm wary of time, so I need to pick which comment I want to make. Yeah, I guess kind of I'll go with what Alyssa was saying about sustainability, and also you mentioned it. But for me, I'm reading a book right now called AI in the Wild. I don't know if you guys have read it. Sorry?
I haven't read it.
Oh, okay. Well, and so basically it's kind of like a political economy take on AI from a sustainability perspective, kind of telling you like there's one, I think like it's part of a series called One Planet by MIT Press. And anyway, in that, they kind of describe how all these things are so promising. This new technology will make everything so much better because you'll be able to predict, you'll be able to know, like kind of Alyssa's example. But what's not really spoken about is, those microchips, for example, how they're made in the first place and the amount of waste that actually goes into all of this. So I don't know. Okay, I'm really not good with my elements, but like titanium, okay, I don't know. But anyway, or like rare earth materials. They're like a lot of it is taken from the Democratic Republic of Congo and like human rights issues. So yeah, how do you view these issues from a Internet of Things, and how do you view like how can you even combat this? Like, is it really sustainability that we're talking about, or sustainable profits?
I understand the question. I don't think it's easy to answer, but in any case, I'll try. So first of all, in order to address for me, the problem of acquiring resources from maybe call them underdeveloped countries that exploit people in order to obtain this is no problem. There's actually a lot of research and doesn't need there's no need for it to to obtain it from this kind of conditions. Okay, there's, for me, actually IoT per se can't combat this. What we need to do is focus on the research of alternative materials, alternative sources of electronics, and make a responsible use of them. You said something before that I wanted to comment on, the waste. Okay, cable, just regular cables like HDMI, your phone charger or whatever, is actually the number one source of waste nowadays in 2020. Okay, so this is actually pretty impressive, because there's so many. Imagine all the number of cables that you have at your home that you don't use. I mean, it's huge, and this is actually a very big issue, because you cannot recycle them properly. I mean, you can try, but it's very complicated. So there's a lot of efforts into trying to minimize and reach a standard. Here we're trying to get into a standard where all cables or same nature of cables actually can be produced by every kind of vendor. There's no vendor locking, and you can reuse them for different purposes. An example is the USB-C Type-C. With this, you can power your devices, you can transfer information, which is essentially what you need to do with a cable. There's practically no other use than transfer data and power devices. And with this kind of standard, if you buy one type of cable, maybe you can use it for many different purposes or many different devices. So I think that we need to reach a point of where we understand, or where we acquire as a customer and as an IoT driven process, we need to understand that we need to make an sustainable use of this kind of elements. I mean, if you ask me, the biggest problem with sustainability is not recycling. Recycling is part of the solution, but the biggest part of the solution is understanding that we don't need to consume so much. Okay, so it's going more or less in that sense of I don't know if this answers your question, but
Yeah, it completely does. Thank you. And I completely agree. The overconsumption is probably the issue, but I don't know. I don't have the.
I mean, it's not my area of expertise, so I wouldn't know.
I have a really small comment regarding what you guys were just talking about, since we are already having a discussion anyway. Whenever you have a technology and you want to find out whether it's worth installing or not. So for example, if we're talking about energy savings, energy consumption is the number one source of CO2 emissions in the world, because we consume energy daily. Everything that's produced, everything we're powering at home, everything we do, we travel, it's a lot of energy consumption. So if you have this technology that can reduce the energy consumption and it is durable, then it is a good investment. So you have to perform a life cycle assessment of any technology, in this case IoT, that you're using, and what kind of emissions, what kind of societal implications it has on every step of its life cycle. And then you have to calculate approximately, with this duration of its lifetime and with these environmental, social, and economic costs, how much is it going to save you in the end, for example, on energy consumption or food waste, etc., etc. So you basically need to find the balance, because everything you produce is going to have a footprint. But it's about how much is it going to help you save in the end? How long is it going to last? If it lasts for 1 month and it saves you energy for 1 month, maybe it's not that good to actually use it. So it's not going to save you as much energy as would be used in its production, for example. But if you use it for a long term, and if it's good technology, and it's, I don't know, the system of systems, I'm not an expert in this, is optimized, then you're going to have a good how would I say it, impact in the end. So in everything, generally in sustainability, it's all about finding the minimum trade-off, kind of. So what you produce and how long it's going to be used for, and whether you can actually make an impact or not, because you can use a lot of green technology that's not going to do anything, because it's not going to last for long enough.
Actually, I totally agree with what you said. I know we're past our time, but if you think about it, actually, energy saving and saving on this kind of overconsumption is economically very attractive, because if you have an asset and you need to replace it every time, or every so many days past, it's actually not very attractive from an economic point of view. If you have something that it's lasting, that lasts longer, or doesn't need to have any kind of maintenance cycle, or a longer maintenance cycle, is actually very attractive from an economic point of view. So again, this applies for many things, not only IoT, but you need to take that into account. If there's something that is gonna save money because it doesn't go to waste, it's actually pretty interesting from an economic point of view.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just realized that we put the official event time until 7:30.
Yeah.
I thought it was until 8. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take up more of your time at all.
No.
And well, thank you so much for actually coming here and making this amazing presentation and motivating probably all of us for at least a couple of days to start our own company and use IoT. Thank you for finding the time and for answering all of our questions. And I hope you enjoyed yourself as well, because we were trying to be very relaxed and chill in here.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. It's been my pleasure. So thank you for having me on board, and hope to repeat that again soon.
Thanks a lot. We hope that you're going to join us on our upcoming events as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everyone for
Thank you.
coming.
Bye bye.
Mhm.